Welcome everyone. My name is Nicolas Maya, and I want to thank you all for your presence today on behalf of the Association of European Researchers in Brazil. The webinar today is the first of a series organized by the section in charge of connecting and integrating incoming European researchers moving to Brazil. This series is called the Brazilian Academy for European Researchers, and we intend to give insights and information on what it is like to work and do research at different stages of the career in a Brazilian higher education institution. And today I have the pleasure to introduce two European researchers based in Brazil who will share with us their experience on getting a PhD in Brazil, either a full PhD, either doing some PhD in a Brazilian university. Our first colleague is Dr. Alberto Corali. Alberto is a postdoctoral researcher at the Hydrogen Laboratory at COPE, Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Alberto received his PhD in 2018 also at UFRJ, and he will certainly present his experience in this university as a PhD student. Alberto is Italian, and he got his bachelor's and master's degrees in energy engineering at the engineering faculty of University of Bologna. Our second guest today is Professor Miguel Dhenin. Miguel is French. He recently got a permanent position as assistant professor at Federal University of Amapá in North Brazil in the Department of International Relations. Before that, he got a PhD and a master's degree in political sciences at Universidade Federal Fluminense, Rio de Janeiro. So both Sebastian and Alberto are from Rio de Janeiro or got their PhD in Rio de Janeiro, but in different universities. Miguel's main research areas are borderland studies, Amazon, geopolitics, and strategic studies. Miguel is a founding member of the Association in Brazil, and will give us highly relevant information on getting a PhD in Brazil. Let's start now with Alberto. Alberto, we are more than eager to listen to your considerations for 15 to 20 minutes. On the webinar will last an hour. Alberto, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Alberto Coralli. I will share my screen with a few slides just to have some material to see to support my speech. As was said in my introduction, I studied in Italy, energy engineering. I did my full like 3+2 years in Bologna, and then I worked for a while in Turin as a project developer. After that, I had the idea to move abroad for a PhD, but I did not know exactly where. While I was looking for a place, one of my former colleagues in Turin contacted me because he recently moved to Rio at the Federal University for a postdoc position, and he discovered that it was existing also a PhD position open at the same laboratory, that he was working with hydrogen systems. That is the same area that he was working with in Turin. So I applied for a PhD position, and it was my experience that I will relate a little bit was a completely Brazilian PhD. So I did not do a part of the work in Europe and part in Brazil, but I did all my PhD in Brazil as at the same way of a Brazilian student. So some things are easier, some things are maybe more difficult than doing the split PhD, let's say. But that was my experience. During the application, I received a lot of support from my former colleague because he was already in Brazil, and he already he was able to speak Portuguese already because he liked the country, and he spent some time in Brazil during years, while for me it was completely new. Actually, I never thought about moving to Brazil before. It was something that came out maybe by chance, or like it was not something very planned, but I liked the opportunity, and I liked a lot of the opportunities to learn different languages. So at the beginning, I had a lot of support from this colleague that basically helped me through the application process. That from a like a selection point of view was quite easy, because I was I fit very well in the position. But from the bureaucratic point of view, can be a little bit difficult, especially if you don't know the language and you're not used to the way that the university work. And the university did not have a very well-developed office to work with foreign students, because Brazilian university as a whole is not very used to receive a lot of students from other countries. They receive quite a lot from South America, but not so much from Europe, and they don't have a very well structured, at least at the university level. My lab had some people that helped me a lot, and also after I arrived in Brazil, the office of my department was quite helpful, but it was everything not very structured on an official point of view from the university. Yeah, sorry. Okay. I did this slide just to explain a little bit how does it work, the post-graduation system in Brazil, because it's a little bit different from what we have in Europe. I also had some problems with that. I will explain better afterwards. But basically, after the graduation, that is between 4 and 5 years, they have two kinds of different kind of post-graduation. That one is stricto sensu, that is the classic academic path, like our PhD in Europe. That is, but it's broken in two parts. The first one is a mestrado, that is 2 years long, and then you have the dottorado, that is the actual PhD, that is normally 4 years. You also have lato sensu post-graduation, that is all these like medical residencies, MBAs, or other kind of experiences you have after the graduation, but they're not exactly the path to become a professor. Okay. The important thing about that is that the European master, so the last 2 years of the Bologna process, are not a Brazilian mestrado. They are not considered by the ministry. They're not considered the same thing, because in Europe we have 5 years of university normally, and then we do directly the PhD. Instead, in Brazil, they don't do it directly, but they have this intermediate stage that is a mestrado. That is actually kind of a small-scale PhD, because it's not. You have to also do some courses. It depends. The number of courses and the number of hours depends a lot on the department. But the important thing is the original research work, that is not as big as in a PhD, but still it has to be something original and something made by the student. And only after that you can access to the PhD. That was kind of a problem for me, because when I was when my case, like my application was examined by the department, one of the professors, let's say, impeded my direct access to the PhD, saying that it was not recognized by the ministry. That was actually true. So I had to enter as a mestrado. I could pass to the PhD without finishing my mestrado, but was like thanks to an internal rule of the university, that you could do this in some if you had enough academic performance good enough. So it's not automatic. You can do this if you are quite quick in finishing your courses and with good grades and so on. You can ask to do directly to the doctorado phase. But anyways, this can be this is something that an European student has to be well aware when trying to apply for a PhD in Brazil, because in Brazil sometimes things are a little bit, let's say, elastic. They can change depending a little bit. Maybe if the department is willing to accept you, maybe it works, but it's not something guaranteed. Normally, actually, the rule of the ministry is that the Mestrado and the 2 years European Master are not equivalent. My experience and in general, what I heard is that the revalidation of the academic degree that you have from Europe is not required. So you can access actually to the post-graduation just with an okay from the department. If they accept, of course, normally, if it's a language that is not English or French, they normally ask for a translation, an official translation. But anyways, normally is not required to do the revalidation that is instead required for, like, for example, professional orders or working as a doctor or engineer or some other liberal profession. The revalidation process is a lot more difficult. You have to present a lot of documents and prove that your course is more or less similar to the Brazilian equivalent and so on. But for the post-graduation, it's a lot easier. You can apply and be approved without that. Majority of courses are in Portuguese. There are a few of them that are in English, but it's still very, very few. And the funding, it's possible. It's more or less, in my experience, the competition for the funding is more or less the same as a Brazilian student. So you don't have access to less funding being foreigner. More or less is the same conditions. But of course, it depends a lot on which is the kind of work. Also, the annual budget that is available, because it changes a lot on political conditions and so on. I thought also that was interesting to spend some words about which kind of funding agencies exist, because Brazil is a federal nation, so they have states and federal level. So at the federal level, there are a couple of funding agencies that normally are responsible of funding research activities, that are the coordination of I did not study the translation of that, but anyways, it's the CAPES and CNPq are the two main federal agencies, while there are also, each state have a foundation that is supports the R&D activities in each state. So these also are quite active in funding researches. And you also can be funded by scholarships from directly from projects. For example, I'm an engineer, so my area receives quite a lot of funding from companies in the, for example, oil and gas companies or of the electrical sector. That they are by law they are obliged to spend a percentage of their annual income in R&D activities with the universities, so they can activate research projects directly with universities, and these funds are managed by a foundation that are actually private foundations, but they are linked to the universities, and they manage the projects, and they can also award the scholarships. My PhD as a whole worked. I worked a lot in the lab, and that was very good for my, for example, for my Portuguese, because it was quite easy to learn working with people every day. That was a very good thing about doing actual work in a physical laboratory. And actually, of course, a lot of people speak English, but there is a lot of people that are not so familiar. So switching to Portuguese is very, very important for being like a full, completely inside the environment. Otherwise, English, of course, is fine, but the communication is a lot more limited. I also attended quite a lot of courses because I had also to do this switching from the Mestrado to the Dottorado. So I had to do some courses in the Mestrado and then to the Dottorado. I probably did maybe 12 disciplines in total. At COPI, that is the Postgraduation Engineering School of the Federal University of Rio, they have a policy that you can pick courses from every engineering department. So it was quite interesting also to switch and to jump a little bit to other areas. Regarding the funding, I was quite lucky because when I arrived, the economy was very good, and so a lot of engineers went directly to the job to their jobs, and there were not of need of like there were not a lot of people interested in doing a PhD. So there were auto scholarships, and actually, I think that I was very well received by the department as a whole. As I said, it's not very common to have students doing their whole research, PhD research in Brazil from Europe. So I think they are quite welcoming, also because of there is interest in having people participating from abroad and bringing another experience and so on. Nowadays, the situation probably is a little bit more complicated, also because the scholarships, at least the federal ones, are not being adjusted since a lot of time. So in an expensive city like Rio, can be a little bit tough to. It's not a very generous budget to live on, but still it's possible in a like a student way of life with not a lot of expenses. Hopefully they will change the value in a short time, because it's starting to be a little bit not very easy to support yourself just with a normal scholarship. And as a whole, my experience was very positive. I think that I cannot say too much. I cannot compare too much with how is the same experience in Europe, because I just did my graduation there. And but I think that as a whole is not very. I mean, speaking with colleagues and so on, I think that is not very different from for an European PhD. I don't think that it's in Brazil it's regarded as something that is very. It's quite prestigious, but it's very directed to academia. So it's not so easy maybe to use your PhD as something valuable in the work environment. I feel that is something quite directed to the university, to continue as a postdoc and maybe as a professor. And yeah, that's more or less it. Actually, just to finish my speech, I would like to I don't know how to say to spend some words for because Brazil was a very welcoming place to do the PhD. I think that it's a very nice place also to stay, and the people is welcoming as a whole. They're very interested in people from Europe, and I think it's a very nice place to go out a little bit from the European bubble. At the same time, it's not so different. So maybe for it's a good fit for people that is also not very adventurous and not very courageous to go in places a lot different from Europe. So it's a good middle way between the two things. Thank you very much for the attention. And it's more or less all.
Thank you very much, Alberto, for your testimony and your insights. And we'll keep on now with Miguel Dhenin. Miguel, please, we are all listening to you.
Thank you, Nicolas. After a brief presentation, a personal presentation, I would like to focus my testimonial experience in Brazil, talking specifically about joint supervision, which is known here as cotutela, which is basically an agreement, a general agreement between two universities, so that you can, after the end of the PhD, you can have two different from two different universities diplomas. So it's a great opportunity for researchers, European researchers or students at first and after researchers, hopefully, that having this experience, and also, as I will explain later, offer you maybe not possibilities but opportunities as a personal level. So first, I graduated in law and political science in France, Université Versailles-Saint-Quentin. And after my graduation, I decided to spend 1 year abroad in an exchange program with a brand new, like I said, umbrella agreement between my French university and UF, the Fluminense Federal University in Niterói, very close to Rio de Janeiro. And after that moment, I decided, after that experience actually, which was very positive, as Alberto mentioned, I was very well received by the institution, but also with the Fluminense people and people at the university. So I decided to start a master in political science at UF also, just after my exchange program. I should stress also that back in 2007, 2008, and Alberto, I will say that a lot, but it's important to give context. Brazil was on a very different moment economically and politically, so they would have massive investment in higher education. So I felt that there was an opportunity for me to stay in Brazil. So I was eligible to a federal scholarship from CAPES that made possible for me to stay as a master student in Brazil for 2 years, like also Alberto presented for us a little bit earlier. And at the same time, it was very all like a snowball. I would like, if I could compare, but I've been invited to participate in a brand new program called Strategic Studies in Security and Defense, which was an all new area for Brazil. For example, there was been a very important strategic defense agreement in 2008. Also a submarine deal, which is actually the program that Brazil's use. So it was very it's interesting at the moment for me to stay in Brazil. Why? If you remember, in 2008 there was a big crisis, economic crisis in the United States first, and then to Europe. So after my this master's, I've been thinking about, wow, what should I stay? What should I do? I've been staying for 3 years, almost directly in Brazil. So I decided to go back to France and to basically think about what would be the next steps, because for a young student already engaging in an academic career, it's not that easy to stay in Brazil. I made some personal choice, and I searched for basically PhD programs in Paris, because my family at the time lived in the suburban areas, and I chose actually the Paris 3 Sorbonne Nouvelle University, mainly because there is a traditional, I would say, or famous Institut des Hautes Études de l'Amérique latine, which is a center for Latin American studies that had a long tradition and many agreements. So I've decided to mail some professors, mainly Brazilianists, and after a few exchanges, I met François Michel Touneau, which was at the time CNRS researcher, almost director, but we discussed many possibilities and included me pretty quickly in this research, in his, and with many colleagues, Juramas 2 program, which was focusing on Amazonia and starting to input some, I would like to say, new way to define sustainability in the Amazonia region, to be very in a general way, not to be too specific. But for me, it was a great opportunity to be involved in a PhD program in France and study Amazonia. That will be, which was at the time very challenging from a personal point of view, because I knew the southeast of Brazil, but I had no idea what 60% of the country was, which is Amazonian region. So I had the possibility to start this PhD, but I had no scholarship at the time in France because of my time, because the time I spent in France. So, and this is the second part of my presentation, I decided to come back to Brazil and start another PhD, and I explained it why later, because I knew at the time I had some contacts. I knew the moment in 2011 we were still in this phase of the Reuni program, which was a massive expansion program for public universities in Brazil. So I knew, like Alberto mentioned, also that fundings are important for a young student, a young researcher in the PhD programs. So I think I was able to, because of the selection program in the PhD in Brazil, in the political science program at also the Universidade Federal Fluminense, I had to pass, like I said, this selection. I was eligible to a CAPES scholarships in at the PhD level. So at this moment, I was having a dilemma. Maybe I should select one PhD, or maybe I should do the both. And I'd mentioned this to my both supervisor, Thiago Rodrigues, and also François Michel Touneau, and we decided, the three of us, that it was possible because the areas were actually dialoguing between them, that could start a joint supervision. And actually, it is a very good way for, in my opinion, if you're a European researcher and you want to stay a semester, 2 years, or maybe the whole duration of your PhD, it was very interesting for me, because at the time, taking aside the bureaucratic steps, and I will be very short presenting, I will try to present them in a short version, but it was also very challenging and opened me. It was the moment I could actually connect two programs together. So all the you know, the agreements, the knowledge, it was like a snowball. It was very interesting. So if I quickly explain how the joint supervision works. So it's important to, of course, get the two supervision professors or advisors together to agree. It's obvious, but sometimes it's not that obvious. And you try to adapt your project, your PhD project, to fit both programs and supervisions. And I think it's important to also remember that in the PhD programs in Brazil has also some seminars that are mandatory, mainly in the first and second semester. It's not the case in Europe. Generally, you have more, I will not say freedom, but you can participate in other activities than those mandatory seminars. And also, you have to be aware of the rules of each PhD program. And each university and each PhD programs have their own rules to be followed. And if you're not following them correctly, you could jeopardize your joint supervision as a whole. And also, it's important to be aware that there are many phases, and the process will take long. So it's important to be patient, and you have to also, regarding European and Brazilian cultures as a bureaucratic point of view, so you have to take that to be aware of that. The agreement basically has to be, if not already available, it was in my case, for example, I had to offer a new agreement. So I took contact in the presidency or reitoria in Brazil, so that they could be aware that I was interested in the joint supervision. Maybe this was back in 2011, 2012. So I hope that 10 years later, not only in my university in Brazil at UF, but many other ones, now there will be more and more PhD candidates and students that will be that have this experience. So hopefully there's already an umbrella agreement that can provide you some support. So the agreement has to be settled and signed in 3 distinct levels. The IS level for both university, where you can decide that there'll be a principal university and a partner one. You have to be aware of calendars, fees, and possible grants. So you have to be very aware of those elements. I recommend, sorry, to be cautious. The second level is the middle level, or department level. For example, you have to get in contact from each programs at the graduate level, the laboratories or your PhD. And you also have to check if you have to take seminars or lectures, or if you have also the possibility of doing grants. And after that, there's the third level, which is the basic level, actually the first one, where both supervisors or advisors get in contact and try to shape your PhD project that they can fit their needs and competencies, which is also a very important thing. I don't want to be too long, but in Brazil, like Alberto said, it's important to stress that English is not that common, even in university, mostly in humanities. I don't know how it is in engineering. So you have also to translate a lot of documents when you want to do a joint supervision. In my case, between Brazil and France, there are an old agreement that avoid mandatory translation of documents, which can be very expensive, but it's not the case for all European countries. I think Portugal also has this kind of agreement. But generally speaking, it was very interesting. The main advantage, I think, is having to be able to have the support of 2 PhD programs. In my case, I was studying in borderlands in Amazonia, so I had the logistic support of the Brazilian university. It was also the funds of the French one. So it was very good for my PhD. And I think it was a game-changing experience at the whole. Also, I think it's very important to be aware of visa and all matters that are related to your personal data. So revalidation, Alberto mentioned that. Visas, as a student, you can do some research, but you cannot work. So also be very aware of that. And after that, I'm sorry. After that, there's also the possibilities, like I said, to connect with many other programs and to have a more international value to your PhD, to connect to laboratories. And for me, that was also not only an opportunity because of the moment Brazil was having as in this higher education system, but also being involved in international research programs. And I think it's very interesting for this. I think, I'm not sure if I should mention, I could be longer, but I would maybe stay, I don't know, Nicola, if tell me if it's okay. If I show the...
I'll give you 5 more minutes and then we'll take some questions.
Okay, perfect. I was not sure, I'm sorry. No, and honestly, like I said, I had a great experience. If I can sum up all these points that I've made, I think the experience was very different from my master's degrees. Having a joint supervision, I think, made me realize that I should and could enter an academic career in Brazil. I felt very supported. I should also stress that I received scholarships during my master's and also my PhD. So that was very fundamental for me to stay in Brazil, to be just focused on doing my research. Like I said, like I mentioned, of course, I have the possibility to had the financial support from France, from the PhD program in France, that helped me a lot for my logistics in the Amazon, which is, like I said, tricky. I've been able to share also this experience I had with colleagues in Europe, that was very interested. Sometimes it's not that common. Students are not aware of the possibility of doing a joint supervision. So there's also some questions if it's possible. I would sum it and say that it's not impossible, but you have to plan it. You have in Brazil, you have generally 4 years. So the ideal thing is to start your PhD and then have this idea that, okay, I will do all the bureaucratic part. I'll do the agreement, and there's also a lot of signature. I hope that nowadays there's a lot of electric signatures, so you don't have to spend so much time sending papers and stuff. But I think it's very worth it. You have a really different experience, and if you want to stay, like it was the case for me, if you want to stay in Brazil, I think it's a good way to stay inside of the academic world, but having a step also, a foot, sorry, in Europe, so you can benefit from this the contacts. So honestly, it's a very, very nice and great opportunity for students, PhD students in Brazil.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Alberto, once again for your ideas and your presentations. In this second round, we'll go for a Q&A. So please, everybody, feel free to send your questions to our two speakers using the Q&A section of Zoom. I'll be joined for this question by my fellow co-host Sébastien Antoine from Federal University of Pernambuco. While we are gathering some more questions, I will ask a first one to both of you, please. Alberto mentioned the selective process that he had to undergo to start his PhD in a Brazilian institution. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more and explain to the audience what it takes to be accepted? You need some degrees. You both discussed the revalidation of degrees. Maybe there is an interview. Do you need maybe some publications? In Brazil is very insisting on publication. What kind of requirements? Maybe language proficiency is required. It probably depends on each university, each graduate program. So, and also it depends on the modality of PhD you do. If it's a full PhD, if you're only spending 1 year, it may be different. If it's a co-tutel, it may be something else. So I wanted to ask both of you of at least some examples of the selective process.
Okay, I did not enter into a lot of details because I think that it depends a lot on actually each university and each department inside of the university. So it's not exactly, you don't have a general rule for everything. My experience was basically an interview with my future supervisor. And of course, you have some paperwork. Your degree, you have to prove that you have an academic degree, and you have to. It depends a little bit on. For me, I had to do the process twice actually, because once it was for the PhD, but then I had this problem that I had to enter as a Mestrado student. So and the Mestrado, on top you have a very important research project. You don't have this defined from the beginning. I had it because actually my supervisor was he already had the project for which he wanted the PhD student. So I did not have to invent so much, but I had anyways to produce a research plan. So you have to show that you have the quite clear idea of what you will do during your PhD. But basically, the steps were an interview with the supervisor, and then being approved by the department. So let's say that all the professors of the department will analyze your application during the meetings that they do periodically, and approve you or not. So it was there were not I don't know, exams or written on, neither oral, but I know that other departments do apply exams and tests for selection of the candidates. It depends a lot on which department. But it was I did all this process remotely. I did not go to Brazil for doing this. I did everything from Italy, and once I got approved, also because to have the visa, that is a point that I forgot to mention. That is of course very important, as Miguel said. To have the student visa, you have to be pre-approved from the university. This is for every kind of student visa. Student visa is not a difficult visa to obtain in Brazil, as soon as you have something from the university proving that you were accepted for a PhD or master's or any kind of course. So basically, was that.
Yeah. I think Alberto was very on keen about some issues that you have to face about selection. But in my case, maybe it was a different time. But Brazilian PhD programs are more. I would not say. I think they expect a PhD candidate a certain level. In France, it's more personal. I had this conversation with my former advisor, and it was very formal. It was almost like okay, are you interested in doing a PhD? You have to pay some fees, but it's okay. In Brazil, no, you have to. Okay, there's a lot of candidates, not that many places, so okay, you have to almost study for the selection, and be aware that you have to prepare a project that is actually engaging in some specific areas that are interesting for the program, but also for your future advisor. So I think, and in my case, there were also like a 3 steps. The first one was an exam, some about the knowledge, the specific knowledge about your area. After that, there's also an English or French exam, which is sometimes confusing for me because I was French national, so I had to do it in English. And the third one, or the final step, is the interview. And interviews are very important. I realized that because of my experience in doing the Mestrado, the Masters and the PhD, I realized that you have to prepare, because this is where the jury will feel we're really take the final decision if you are okay, you're a good fit for the program. So having this in mind, I really, especially when I came back in 2012 from France, I decided to, okay, I have to study more Portuguese for the reading exam, and also practice more, because I knew Portuguese was important at the time. I'm not sure. As a French national, I knew Portuguese because my mom's Portuguese, so it was not that hard. But for some candidates from abroad, it can be very challenging. At the master's level, I think they asked me to have the CELPE, which is a diploma in Portuguese for exchange for foreigners, that I took in 2008. But for the PhD program, that was not needed. But now, for example, when I was entering the Unifab system, I had to present it. So it's also important to have the CELPE, Certificado de Eficiência em Português para Estrangeiro, in Portuguese, which is not that common, and you have to, and now it must be remote, but at the time I had to be in a special place, special time to do the exam. So also for PhDs, there's a lot, and also like Alberto said, paperwork and visas. I think, and I hope that nowadays all those procedures are more flexible, I would say, and the universities are more aware and familiar. I used to work with foreign students.
Thanks a lot, Miguel and Alberto. So we received 2 questions, one from Thomas and the other one from Mathilde. And both of them are quite close in the kind of preoccupation they have. So Thomas told us that he's Brazilian, but he's doing his PhD in Europe, and like he's in Barcelona and spent time in Europe in the last 15 years. So you knew probably better the Brazilian academy than he does. And he was wanting to make a short period research trip to Brazil doing his PhD, and was wanting to know if you know about opportunities to form this kind of short-term exchange doing PhD between Europe and Brazil. And Mathilde has basically the same question. What is the opportunities of scholarship, for instance, paid by the European Union or European Union country and by Brazil, some kind of bilateral scholarship? Let's say the kind of collaboration possible between industry and academia. Is it something that that's happening in Brazil, and that it's possible to find fundings for that? So perhaps we can start with Alberto, considering the last section you spoke about industry and academia, and then go to Miguel.
Okay, regarding specific schemes, I'm not aware of at least at the European Union level, specific for Brazil. I know that Brazil can apply to some funding by the European Union, but only in a few areas that are very specific and defined by the framework, the European research framework. I don't know of any scheme specific between European Union and Brazil. The funding available at the Brazil side, I spoke a little bit during my presentation. It's basically from those agencies I mentioned. Foreigner student can apply at the same way as a Brazilian. So basically, it's a decision of the department. In my experience, I think that it was actually better to be a foreign student because they were probably interested in having me. So it was maybe a little bit because they have to choose. Not everybody gets the scholarship, at least at the first year of the Mestrado or of the PhD. So if they have to choose, maybe they considered the fact that I was from abroad and I did not have any support in Brazil. So I think it was actually a little bit probably easier for me to get it. But it depends a lot on the availability that is actually quite constrained in this moment. Regarding European funding, I think probably very possible if there are some like split PhD schemes. So, but I think that the student should be based in Europe and doing part of research in Brazil. In this way, it's probably easy to use the European funding, but it's not as easy if you do the whole PhD in Brazil. Regarding the industry, actually, like I'm an engineer, so I'm quite used actually to do projects together with companies. But the way they do is not, at least in my experience, is not doing the research at the company. Actually, they like put money in the university for doing the research part for them. So everything like the bureaucracies and the students' life, the way you connect with people is the same as a regular PhD students, but you're researching for the company. That's interesting because you also get to know some the interests of the companies in the PhD field and the research that they are interested into. But it's not something that is so common to do inside the company. I don't know if I explain more or less.
Well, I think Alberto said all the topics or the points I would make, but in the case that you are interested of fundings from both sides, I think there's, for example, in the case of France that I know a little bit more, I know there's this agreement between CAPES and some, I'm not sure it's the Ministry of Education, higher education in France, but there is a CAPES, the COFECU program, which is very traditional and had a lot of agreements inside of it, where many areas can be actually related to the COFECU program. Charlotte said it's currently open, so it's a good news. But honestly, regarding scholarships in Brazil, CAPES, CNPq, and FAPS are, if you stay in Brazil and you don't have a joint supervision. In my case, I really think that was a great opportunity, not also regarding the academy point of view, but also fundings. Try to diverse my fundings, and it works. It worked actually. Back in 2014-15, I remember that the political moment was different, that it was a few years back. So grants and scholarships were getting more difficult to get. And also, I remember that during a short period, I was not able to receive my scholarships. So it's a reality we have to face, unfortunately, in Brazil. So yeah, I think if you have, for example, a possibility during a special PhD program where one university has an agreement with another European one, I think it's more not solid, but it's more I would like to say guarantee that you are not facing that kind of problem. If you depend only, as it was in my case, the fundings of the Brazilian higher education system, it was just a few months, but it was not that big a period. So it was great, and I think it's so. Regarding industry, I cannot compare because I am all about humanities, so it's not my area. I'm sorry.
Thanks a lot, Miguel and Alberto. I will add something and then give the floor to Nicolas for some compliments. In my case, I did a short visit in Brazil doing my PhD, and it was funded by the French-speaking community of Belgium. So I got like a travel grant for 6 months, and they pay a top-up on my PhD fellowship, paid the travel cost as well, and I was able to spend 6 months of field work at USP in this way. So in Spain, perhaps you will find the same kind of internationalization grant from PhD students you can apply for. And then at the postdoc level, you have a lot more opportunities to get funding to come to Brazil, specifically around the CAPES Fringe program, and it will be something we will speak about at the next webinar. But I will give the floor to Nicolas with sort of, some additional comments on that.
Very briefly, I was going to mention also for German students, DAAD, which is one of the German academic bodies, which also provides funding to study abroad. So they do have agreements with Brazil and money to fund students. I really wanted to repeat and stress out what Alberto and Miguel already said. In Brazil, each graduate program, as we call them, those academic department where you enroll as a PhD or master students, they do receive a quota of funding for their students from the federal government, from CAPES or CNPq, those agencies which have been mentioned. But each one of those programs has a lot of autonomy to manage the funding. Typically, they receive X months per students of funding, which means that they can fund one given student for 3 or 4 years, or one other students for 2 years. Some of the students don't finish their PhD, so there are some months left. Some other students have a funding from the Brazilian government, but at some point they stop because they need to travel abroad, for instance. So they get another grant and then they stop receiving the current funding from the local program, which means that every year, every program has some flexibility, some leftover, some months maybe to give. And of course, the job of the program manager is to find another students to give them money which is left. So this means that if you are willing to go to Brazil, you need to contact one potential advisor from one of those programs and really ask them if they couldn't get a few months of funding for you. I think that's the best strategy regarding the Brazilian funding. Contact a local advisor, someone like Miguel, for instance, if you want to go to Universidade Federal do Amapá, and ask the advisor, convince the researcher that you're a good PhD student, that your research will be important, and ask him or her to support you in maybe getting some local funding. At least in the very large, very important, very good graduate programs like we have in COPI in Rio de Janeiro or in many other universities, usually there is some possibility on this side. Finally, I also wanted to mention a very important opportunity of funding for European students, which is Erasmus Plus. At PhD level, the European funding funds both students to go to Europe from outside of Europe, but also they fund European students to go in a country like Brazil. So you have to check at the international office of your European university whether or not they have European Plus international credit mobility agreements with a Brazilian university. And if there is such an agreement and funding, if it fits with your field of knowledge, usually those agreements depend on the field. But the question comes from Spain. I forgot the university, Barcelona. It's typically a university, Barcelona, which has many Erasmus Plus agreements with Brazilian universities. So you definitely should contact your international office to see if they have something fitting your need with Brazil through Erasmus Plus. That was what I wanted to add to the answers.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas. Thanks a lot, Miguel and Alberto. I will give an end to this webinar by sharing the programmation, the schedule of the next upcoming webinars. So after the keynote we had last month, it was the second webinar, how to come to Brazil doing PhD. And then we have the next steps of the academic career. How to get a postdoc position will be discussed next month in August. So things about CAPES-Fringe, things about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Global Fellowship, experience of coming in Brazil and then getting a permanent position in a Brazilian university will be the webinar for September. And then a last one in October about the way these postgraduate programs are organized, the way research and teaching are quite merged in Brazil in order to navigate better the way the Brazilian academia is working here. That's it. Thanks a lot, everybody, and wait to see you for the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.